Blur. Blur are back with their latest studio release entitled The Magic Whip. This is their first album since 2003's Think Tank. Think Tank was recorded in 2002 with guitar player Graham Coxon leaving during the recording sessions, and as a result, Think Tank has very minimal guitars and was one of the least Blur-sounding Blur records. I just like saying Blur. Blur formed in the late 80s in Manchester and helped usher in sort of the whole Britpop, Brit-rock Manchester sound throughout, well, obviously the UK, and then with their 1997 self-titled album, and specifically the song Song 2, Woohoo! They found a really high mainstream level of success here in North America. Now, interesting fact, here in North America, it was a statistic that I'd heard, and I did no verification of this whatsoever, so I could be completely wrong. But in the Greater Toronto Area, per capita has a higher success rate for Brit rock, Britpop, and generally speaking alternative rock bands than any other city in North America. Now again, per capita, I mean, just by sheer volume of population, there's going to be more people buying copies of Blur's, album Parklife, which was released back in 1994 in New York City, than there would be in all of Canada. But per capita, the Greater Toronto Area, Toronto and the Lake Ontario Basin there, tends to have a larger target demographic for alt rock and especially the Britpop. And a lot of bands that came from the UK found some of their biggest audiences in the beginning of their careers in the Greater Toronto Area. And if it hadn't been for, say, CFNY and other indie rock stations in the Toronto area, I would not have been exposed to all the Britpop that I had been growing up in the 1990s. And one thing about Blur, I own all their recordings. I even actually have a couple singles floating around in my collection. I never ever go to my wall of CDs and say, I really want to listen to Blur right now. But whenever they're on, whether it's on the radio or if, I'm at a friend's place or wherever the case may be, if I ever hear Blur, I always say, oh, Blur, I love this band. And the same can be said, again, for this latest release, which is about a month old now, here in North America, entitled The Magic Whip. And this, again, is a real return to form. I really enjoyed Think Tank. Again, I bought it because it was a new Blur album, and I love Blur. It was in my CD player in my car for about 3 or 4 months, so I listened to it pretty regularly, and I probably haven't listened to it more than twice since 2003. But whenever I hear Blur, I really enjoy Blur. And that's kind of the weird thing about this band for me, is that I like them out of proportion to the amount of time I actually spend listening to them. So, and it's not out of, like, I buy Blur records because they're popular and in order to be cool with the Britpop crowd, I've got to like them. It's more like, no, I really genuinely like them, but when they're out of sight, they're certainly out of mind. If someone says, name bands that you really enjoy, Blur never pops up in my head. Yet I look forward to hearing all their new music. So, take that as you will. If you're a Blur fan and you haven't picked up The Magic Whip, why not? It's really good. If you're a Blur fan and you're reluctant to pick this up because of the time that it's been since their last album, and or their last album, the aforementioned Think Tank, was not the best of the Blur releases, you can rest assured that you are returning with this album back to the leisure, Parklife, Great Escape type of era music, a little more jangly pop than, say, the sort of lo-fi American indie rock sound of their self-titled release, and the more rock, blues gospel type sound of Lucky 13. Now, again, when Lucky 13 came out, I went, oh my God, this record is so good. So I listened to it for about 3 or 4 months pretty regularly, and I haven't listened to it again since at least 1998. Although if you know, my daughter or my wife went down to my CD wall and said, oh, this looks interesting, I'll put it on, I would really enjoy it. And again, it's the same with the Magic Whip. I don't imagine that after 3 or 4 months from now, when this CD leaves my car, that I will listen to it again with any semblance of regularity. And that's not because of the sheer volume of music I have to listen to. It's just more like Blur is like pizza. That's a bad analogy. Blur is like a piece of art that you buy because at the store you like it a lot, and you put it on your wall, and then you leave it. And every now and again you look at it and go, oh, that piece of art I bought 5 years ago, and then 6 years ago, and then 12 years ago. Oh, I really like that. Huh. And then you don't think about it again until the next morning when you come down to your kitchen and you see it. So, if you are looking to get into Blur, there are several greatest hits compilations and singles compilations that are very much worth looking into. Blur's albums, with perhaps the exception of The Great Escape, which was their third major label release, with the exception of perhaps The Great Escape, Blur's albums are never as a whole as good as the individual singles on the album. So, again, Song 2 and Beetlebum off of their self-titled 1997 release were the best songs on that record, and it's one of the rare occasions where the record company and or the marketing company behind the band or the promoters behind the band actually pick the right songs off the record to promote and push. Because, again, they never release an album that from start to finish I say, oh my God, I have to listen to this over and over again to make sure I've heard it all. Their singles are always the best parts of the records. And again, this is the case with the Magic Whip. So, I've been talking for nearly 7.5 minutes about the Blur and their new album, The Magic Whip. It's worth picking up if you are an existing Blur fan, and if you enjoy their older sound, you will enjoy this record. If you really didn't enjoy Lucky 13 and Think Tank, give it a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. That's all I can say. I hope if anyone who is a huge Blur fan, I hope you're not offended by my evaluation of the band as a whole. Again, I really do like them, and I've seen them live a couple times, and I've given them a lot of my money over the years, and I will continue to do so. I don't think I'll be listening to them endlessly, and I won't be listening to this record probably at the end of the year, and it probably won't make one of my best of lists, but I still really like them a lot. It's a bizarre thing to try to explain. Blur, The Magic Whip, pick it up if you're a Blur fan, skip it if you have no interest in Blur whatsoever. Or even if you're thinking casually about getting into Blur, I recommend a Greatest Hits compilation, or if you want to buy a complete album of theirs, I would start with The Great Escape. That is a very, very good record. My name is Daryl. I've been your critic. This is Album a Day Online. Leave comments below, like, share, tell your friends about this Yahoo on the internet that seems to think he can talk about music objectively and with any sense of journalistic integrity. Leave a comment below. I'll see you tomorrow for another Album a Day Online.